Hi friends, I'm Abby and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be reviewing some new releases and chatting through my thoughts on these 3 new releases. So I'll put timestamps in the descriptions where I talk about each of these books if you're only interested in hearing about one of them. And the 3 books that I'm going to be reviewing today are I'm Glad My Mum Died by Jennette McCurdy, Love on the Brain by Hazelwood, and Babel by RF Kuang. So 3 new releases that are very recently come out, and I'm going to be chatting through my thoughts on them and whether I think you should read them, whether I think they are worth the hype, because I think these are all very, very hyped releases that have had a lot of marketing behind them, and my personal opinions on them, and they're all quite different. So it's not as though I'm going to be comparing them in terms of favourites, because they're all very different genres. I figure because I don't own it, I will start with I'm Glad My Mum Died. So this one it's not my normal genre, it is non-fiction, and Jennette McCurdy is not someone that I have personally really followed. So going into the book, I did not have that much of a idea of who she was, or I had a rough idea, but I didn't really know that much about her before going into it. I had just seen that there had been quite a few people reading it, and I was intrigued by the premise of the book. This is an autobiography following Jennette and her life as a child actress in Hollywood, and her life growing up in her family situation, her life in Hollywood, and where she is now. And she was on Nickelodeon on shows like iCarly, and I didn't really grow up with that. I grew up with CBBC and CITV and more UK based TV shows, and I didn't really have that much exposure to US children's shows growing up. I don't know if that's a common experience for people here in the UK or not, but we didn't have Sky, so we didn't have those channels. I listened to this, it is on Scribd here in the UK. I read it in a day. I was very engaged in hearing about Jennette's life and her story and the way that it was written. I'd say that the chapters are very short, so it's very engaging to keep listening to it, and she narrates it herself. And it's one of those books where the way that it's told, it's quite light, but the themes that it's exploring are very dark, and that it comes across in a way that you are very engaged in this life, and then you're realizing how dark the things that she was going through are. And so I think that made it a very engaging read, because I was always invested in seeing what snapshot we were going to explore next, or what part of the life is going to be explored next, and then seeing that unfold. Jennette's life as a child star, her mum pretty much forced her into being a child actress. She really pushed for her to be in this environment and in this world, and then encouraged an eating disorder and encouraged unhealthy behaviours from her daughter. And the book is split into 2 parts. We have a before section, so before her mum died, and then an after, so after her mum died, and coming to terms with the abuse that she faced from her mother, and coming to terms with where she is in life and how she is emotionally dealing with what has happened to her, and trying to come to terms with both the situation that her mum put her in and what the movie, film, the TV business put her in, and coming to terms with it. And I think I've since watched quite a few interviews that she has done following the publication of this book, and the way that she has spoken about it. And it for me, I think she comes across very, very eloquently. I think she's very passionate about the book, and she holds herself with grace, I would say. I'm personally not going to rate the book. I think it's very hard to rate an autobiography, because I don't think you can really put a star rating on someone's life. In terms of critically, I think it's very, very well written. I think it's well paced. I think it's an engaging read, and I think if you are interested in seeing what it is like for a child star, and who comes from a more abusive family, and who has put on a persona for a lot of her life, if you're interested in that, then I think it would be a great book to pick up. But as well, I would put a lot of trigger warnings on it, that it is not a light read. Despite in some ways the narrative structure of it is not a light read, and that there are definitely trigger warnings in there for predominantly, I would say, eating disorders, but maybe go and check trigger warnings before going into it. I would definitely think that this one is worth the hype. I understand why it is so hyped, and I would recommend it. Moving on from the non-fiction, which is a bit outside of my normal, and moving back into fantasy, my normal genre, with Babel. So I have ended up with 2 copies. I have a standard copy, and I also have the fairy look copy, which is absolutely stunning if we're just going to look at the aesthetics of it. This sprayed edge. The sprayed edge is just a masterpiece in and of itself. Very, very pretty edition of Babel. So it's definitely got the aesthetics But in terms of the content of it, and the reason I have 2 copies is because this edition did not arrive in time for me meeting RF Kuang, Rebecca, at a signing in London. So I felt like as I was there, I had to buy, I was forced into it, buy another copy, this one, for her to sign and personalise to me. And she also signed my Poppy War set as well. So very, very exciting there. This is a book which I feel has had a lot of hype, as quite a few books have had recently. This one, I think, has got a lot of hype, and it has had quite a few positive reviews from reviewers that I've seen and that I trust. And I would agree that I really like this. I really thoroughly enjoyed this, but I don't think it is going to work for everyone. I really do not think that this is a book that is going to work for a lot of people. I wonder if those people are quite quiet right now, because although I really liked this, I feel like it worked for me, but the aspects that I like are not other people aren't going to like. So in this, you are following a main character, Robin Swift, and he is taken from his home country of China when he is a young boy and brought to England by this professor, where he is trained in languages and translation and being fluent in these languages. So he becomes fluent in Chinese, Mandarin, English, Latin, Greek, maybe something else, and he's trained in those languages to attend Oxford and attend the university as a student, where people learn more about languages and the power and the magic that goes behind language. And in this world, you have these devices, this silver, where you put a word in one language and a word in another language, and the translation or the meaning that is lost between those 2 words creates the form of magic in this world. And it's I guess a form of technology in some ways, in that it powers the technology in this world and it powers the development, and that development is all sort of hoarded by the British at Oxford, and it's not really shared out to other countries, even though they are using students from other countries to create the power of these other languages to create this magic source. And so you follow him and the people that he meets at Oxford as they journey through this world, and it's set in the 1800s in Oxford, as they journey through this world and the difficulties that they face as foreign students in England at that time, and the way that they are looked down upon and the way society views them, and also the colonialism and the dynamics that are at play within this world at that time. And it definitely does take a lot of what is real history, but adds a magical twist to it. So I will say that if you do not like historical fiction, then potentially this book will not be for you, because it is very much grounded in history, in our world's history, but it adds a magical twist in that there is this magic system at play. But I would say that this is a combination of historical fiction mixed with fantasy. There's this fantastical element, but if you don't like historical fiction, it's not going to work for you. For me, I would say this really works. This has a big focus on language, a big focus on the etymology of language, a big focus on how languages develop and where they come from, and the things that are lost in translation, in that you can never quite translate something exactly the same, that you can translate the structure of a sentence, you can translate the meaning of a sentence, but you can never quite translate something fully. And I think if you're interested in this as a theme, then you'll probably be interested in this book, because there are lots of classroom scenes where they are exploring this and the things that are lost in translation and the things that go into your identity and how your language and your upbringing and how that all forms part of your identity. And what happens when you are separated from that, and what happens when you're separated from that, how you feel about your identity, and if you are of a certain nationality but you grow up without that language and without that identity. And for me, I am very interested in this. I went to university and I studied languages. I studied French and Spanish. I'm very much fascinated in that. I took courses on what is lost in translation and on identities and the idea of translating between different languages and the etymologies of language and how languages develop and where languages come from, and sort of how the diaspora of different languages and how they all sort of cut the roots of languages. Like, I find that fascinating. Personally, because it's what I've studied, it is something that I've always been interested in, and I find that very, very fascinating, especially combined with like the other themes that are explored in this, in terms of colonialism and the power dynamics within society and within the UK, but those themes in terms of the translation and language I thoroughly enjoyed. But I think for some people, if you're not interested in that, you'll probably find it a little bit dry. because you'll be going, I don't really care. Why are you lecturing me in a fantasy book? Why are you teaching me these things? For me, I was engrossed because I was like, oh, this brings me back to when I was in school, when I was studying. But that was because of my personal interest in the subject matter. I really liked the characters in this. I liked the journey of the plot and the evolution of the plot and where this came to. I liked the whole arc of the story and everything that it explored. And I did also like that it was a standalone. I think it was the right length for the story that was to be told here. I don't think it needed to be any longer. I think it was perfect working as a standalone. I did enjoy our characters. I would have liked more time with them, yes, but I think that's the best way for a book to end, for it to wrap up in a way that you are satisfied, but also you could imagine what would happen next or where this could go in the future. I will say, as a British person from Oxford originally, who lives in London, there were like a couple of things in terms of inconsistencies, but they were so minor. Like the majority of this, I was like, okay, I can really appreciate like the amount of effort that went into making this accurate. The only things I noticed were there was one time where Hatchet is described as being opposite Fortnum and Mason, and it's not. It is next door to. Like, it was just one word. You said opposite instead of next door to. Such a small thing. And then also she goes on about how much it rains in Oxford. And I was like, okay, that's a very American idea of what Britain is like. Americans, stereotyping you. The way that you would stereotype us is that it rains all the time in England. It doesn't rain that much here. Well, at least in the south, it doesn't actually rain that much. We have a moderate climate. We don't have loads of like hot days, but we don't actually rain that much. We're probably a bit grey, and we're probably a bit like boring temperature. I don't know, like 18 degrees a lot of the time, but we don't actually rain all that much. And the way this goes on about how much it rains in Oxford, I'm like, it doesn't actually rain that much. It doesn't. Those are my only two things in terms of like the location as a British person. But I really like this. I really love the writing style. I knew that going in. I liked RF Kuang's writing style. But seriously, I don't think this is going to be for everyone. I really do not think this is going to be for everyone, despite it really being for me. So if you are like me and you find passion in languages and etymology of language and translation, then this would probably be a good thing for you, as well as if you enjoy like characters and stuff. But if that does not interest you, then I don't know if it will be for you. And then the final book that I'm going to be reviewing today is Love on the Brain by Ali Hazelwood. This is her second full-length novel. I read The Love Hypothesis last year and I adored it. I absolutely loved The Love Hypothesis. Sorry, this hand's getting tired. I adored The Love Hypothesis. I really thoroughly enjoyed that book by her. And Love on the Brain, I liked it, but I didn't love it quite as much. So this one, I think I would have liked it as much if I didn't notice so many similarities between the two main characters as in her previous book. And also I have read her short stories, and again I feel as though a lot of the characters have the very similar personality traits in such that it all reads very same, as though she's taken these main characters and she's put them into different scenarios. She hasn't created new characters. So Love on the Brain, we're following main character B. Prior to the start of the book, her and Levy went to the same school, and they had a brief overlap when they were in school together, and they did not get along, and they had quite a strange relationship. Then at the start of the book, she gets a position at NASA where she is there to help with the neuroscience going into these new helmets, and Levi works there, and they have to collaborate on this project to work together, and she believes that he is stilting her and her input at every turn. And so you're following these two characters as they come to realise what's going on between them, what the situation is at NASA, and go from there. And I really like the characters. I mean, I like these character dynamics. I love them in the Love Hypothesis. Like, I like the way that she writes these character dynamics. I would just like if the characters differed a bit more, and that they had a bit more to their personality than being, well, for the female, very petite and quirky, and for the male, very large and muscly and a bit broody. Like, I think if you took the characters from her previous books and put them in here, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between them. That they're very cookie cutter the same. And so that's why I say, like, I think if I read this first, then I probably would have enjoyed this more than The Love Hypothesis. It's just that I'm seeing so many similarities between the two books. But yeah, I mean, I like how this explores women in STEM and women in science, in the science field overall and how women are viewed within the science field, and I guess how women are viewed in the workplace overall, and like how we as the female are like seen in the workplace, and how maybe underappreciated we could be by certain male figures. I would say I much preferred, I think, the ending and the way that the love hypothesis wraps up. This one, it felt a little bit like a bad action movie, and I was like, I don't really see why a romance has such a bad action movie ending, because I'm going in this for the romance and you've got to put like a very weird bad action movie villainous scene in at the end. Like, I didn't feel like it matched with the rest of the book. I still enjoyed it, and I would still definitely recommend Annie Hazelwood, despite those critiques that I've been saying. I did read this in a day. I found it very, very engaging to read. I was completely compelled to keep reading the whole time. I mean, I did read it in a day, which is quite rare for me, and I could not put it down in that sense, that I was definitely engaged in seeing what was going to happen next, and seeing how these characters' lives were going to intertwine and where their lives were going to go. Although not perfect for me, I would still recommend it, especially if you're after something fun. If you're after reading a light read in terms of some levity, and in terms of a break between maybe some more darker, more draining books, or books that require lots of concentration, I think this is a good one to put into the mix if you are needing something lighter and more fun. So those are 3 new releases that I've read and my thoughts on them. Let me know if you've read any of these 3 books, if you're interested in picking any of them up. If there are any other new releases that you want me to do a review on, then just let me know. And thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my future videos. Bye!